President-elect Donald Trump is on track to be sentenced in his hush money case tomorrow. New York's highest court declined today to stop the hearing. So Trump's lawyers now had argued that the Constitution requires an automatic pause during an appeal of the verdict. The president-elect was convicted of falsifying business records, and now he insists that he did nothing wrong. The judge in the case has indicated that he won't impose jail time, fines, or probation. Trump has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to call off the sentencing in an emergency motion. Let's bring in our chief legal analyst, Clive Rhodes, to this conversation. So, let's just take us through. What can we expect?
Fireworks, obviously, you can expect that because in the filings they've already made fireworks. There's something called the question presented. In the question presented, they present 3 questions to the court that they're asking the court to answer. The court has already granted cert, so they'll hear this case. But even if we step back, New York decided not even have to make a decision. They decided not to even grant a hearing. So that was the first part. The highest court in New York said, we're not going to hear this. We're done. We're going to rely on what Judge Merchan said on the lower court, specifically that this case needs some resolution. The judge's own word says that the court has to make a resolution with this because at some point presidential immunity will take place once you're sworn in. And he says it is the court's firm belief that the only way to bring finality to this matter will be in the best interest of all parties. What I expect to see is that you'll have one side saying that this is done exactly how it was supposed to be done. You'll have the other side saying that he has presidential immunity, that the acts that they used within the case of this trial overstepped the boundaries and the guidance that was set forth by the Supreme Court with their most recent ruling saying that official acts of the president, he's granted immunity. And so that is going to be the point of contention. And that hearing is, did in the trial, in Judge Merchan's case, did they allow information, evidence to be used against President-elect Trump that was used during the course when he was the president? If that was the case, then I would 100% agree with his legal team that his conviction would need to be overturned.
You know, it's so interesting in this case in particular to be able to see all the different directions that it has gone, because you can remember when we first talked about the hush money trial, you had the court of public opinion. Now I think it's to the point where people are just like, you know what, do you want this over? Obviously, President-elect Trump wants this over, but right now he's also saying the prosecutors are urging the Supreme Court to stay out of this fight. Explain that. Well,
prosecutors are urging them to stay out of the fight because if this was a normal case, if this was, and nothing about this was normal, right? This is the former president, then president-elect, now about to be president, right? But if this was a normal case, nothing like this would happen. He would have been indicted by a grand jury. There would have been a trial, either a guilty or a not guilty or a hung jury. In this case, it was a guilty conviction, 34 felony counts. Immediately after that, at some point, you'd have a sentencing hearing. Sentencing would be done, and they would either be going to prison or going to probation. That's normally what would happen. So we talk about a number of times, you talk about the court of public opinion. Also in this case, you saw a heightened awareness of this 2-tiered system of justice. There were a number of times where folks were saying that the justice system is being weaponized and that he is getting some different type of justice because of who he is. And I would agree, but it's not difference from a negative standpoint. It's a difference because the way that it's being delivered, the way that justice is being delivered to him in this case is different because it's sensitive. You're talking about the president of the United States. So it's going to be hard for him to figure out how he can sentence him. Can I put the president in jail? Those are things. So he's already said, I'm not going to do that. All of this is outside the normal scope. Normally a judge is not thinking about your profession. They're not thinking about, well, if I send him to jail, they're not going to be able to go to work tomorrow. They're not. They're saying, I have a sentence. This is what you're supposed to do.
He's not going to go to work tomorrow, but he does have a party tomorrow.
And at that party, they'll be talking about the next steps for the country. That's, again, why it makes this unique, because in this situation, you have the most powerful person on the planet going to go be standing in front of a judge. I'd love to be there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to be able to see how it unfolds. Clive Rhodes, we appreciate it.